Okay, so this is Midrash Rabbah on parshat Bo, and it'll work for Tisa as well. And it's entitled, Actually, it was Pharaoh who hardened God's heart. So once again, strap your seatbelts, because the Midrash is always thinking out of the box and turning things on its head, notions that we have known for years. So the Midrash is actually saying that there's proof that Pharaoh hardened God's heart. How so? Well, let's start with what was bothering the Midrash. What was bothering the Midrash was that in almost every case that we had in all the plagues, the word that is used is vayechazek et le Pharaoh. And suddenly here in parshat Bo, it starts out with the word hichbadati. So why the sudden change? So the Midrash is going to answer it because in this case, as I said, there was the reverse going on. But before we get there, the Midrash starts out somewhere else. It's actually quoting somebody who asked a question about creation, and he wanted to know if anything was difficult for God, like making mountains and valleys. Why couldn't it all be flat? And the Midrash says something interesting. That was not difficult for God, but you know what is difficult for God? When he has to let evildoers live. Now, what does that mean, let evildoers live? When do you have to let evildoers live? Well, in the case of Pharaoh, it's right up front with the pasuk we have, Laman shisi ososai ele bikirbo. I wanted to do wonders. I wanted to show the wonders. So that's one reason why Pharaoh is been left alive. Second reason is, the Midrash says earlier, very interesting, that actually Moshe was concerned, didn't understand his mission. If I want to get the Jews out, why bother with all these plagues? And God said, no, there's another part to the mission, and that is, and this happened after around Bara, that plague, and where Pharaoh actually exclaimed, Hashem atzadik v'ani v'ami harashaim, and God wanted him to get to that level, even though it didn't last. God wanted him to get to that level. A third reason for keeping Rishaim alive is, unfortunately, evil people are used to cause tragedies, especially to the Jewish people. They're what we would hopefully be learning opportunities, growth opportunities, not unlike October 7th. And so that's a reason to keep evildoers alive. And of course, the last reason for keeping evildoers alive actually has nothing to do with Pharaoh, because it's about free will. And we know, of course, if someone who was wicked, everyone dropped dead, then people would, against their will, say, okay, I better be good, because look what happened to him. So this, of course, ironically does not apply to Pharaoh, because he had lost his free will or was compromised in some way. So now the Midrash gets back to this notion of Pharaoh hardening God's heart. How is that so? So having your heart hardened usually means you're taking away options from someone. They can't do what they want. Because Pharaoh has this tendency, as Moshe pointed out when he was trying to save the Jews from the sin of the golden calf, has this tendency to want to desecrate God's name and point out, God is not so powerful. Yes, he did all these plagues and we saw all these wonders, and he got a slave nation to leave Egypt, which is very unusual, but he couldn't sustain them in the desert. So, that Lama Yomru Mitzrayim, that phrase that Pharaoh said is a tendency that Pharaoh has. So the Midrash says, you see that because God knew about this tendency, he had to back away and not destroy the Jewish people at that time after the golden calf. And so you see, so to speak, that God is, Kaviyachol, had his heart hardened by Pharaoh's tendency and personality. Now, you may say to yourself, what is it that Moshe said? It's going to be very bad public relations if you kill out the Jews now, and that worked. What I'm going to suggest is God loves us, and God did not want to destroy us. So God used a pretext that Moshe suggested when he said, Lama Yomru Mitzrayim. So that gave God the cover so that he could not destroy us. It was never his intention to destroy us. He didn't need Moshe to say that, but it gave him the cover. God conceals his ways, and I believe that that is what's really going on, and that's really how you explain, this very strange public relations ploy that Moshe pulled off, and how you explain this interesting notion the Midrash is bringing here, that actually it was God's heart that was hardened because of Pharaoh. Have a great Shabbos.